And good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I really appreciate you being with me. We are continuing our study of the feast days of Old Covenant Israel. These are the feast days that are elucidated in Leviticus chapter 23, Numbers chapter 28. There are 7 feast days, followed by Shemini Atzeroth. And we have been focused on the very last of those feast days, not Shemini yet, but that is the Feast of Sukkot. It was the Feast of Harvest. It was the Feast of Ingathering. It was also called the Feast of the Joy of the Nations. And on it goes. And what I've been sharing with you over the last several weeks is how the end of the charismatic gifts of the Holy Spirit, the miraculous gifts of the Holy Spirit, corresponds directly with Sukkot. And that connection seems to me to be more than obvious, because the New Testament writers were anticipating what? Harvest at the end of the age. Harvest, which is Sukkot, at the end of the age. Now, this is where it gets highly controversial. I don't have to tell you. Historically, those who take the position that the charismatic gifts continue today, they said, well, yes, the charismatic gifts end at the end of the Christian age, at the end of time, the coming of the Lord. Then, strangely enough, and I was raised in this particular viewpoint of saying, well, harvest is indeed at the end of the age. But then in that fellowship of the amillennial world, there was a complete and total disconnect between Sukkot, the fulfillment of Israel's feast days, and the end of the Christian age, because fundamental to the amillennial view in which I was raised, and this is mostly the view also of the postmillennial view, and that is, okay, the gifts ended in the first century, and yet we're still looking for the harvest. Do you see the disconnect? If in fact, and there's really no question about it, but if in fact Sukkot represented, symbolized, foreshadowed the harvest, the end of the age harvest, then you cannot postulate, you cannot suggest that harvest has not happened yet without saying that Israel's feast days remain as shadows of the good things that are about to come. This is part of the huge self-contradiction within the amillennial and postmillennial world. On the one hand, they say, oh, well, the feast days have been fulfilled. Then they turn right around and they say, oh, well, the harvest hasn't happened yet, meaning Sukkot hasn't been fulfilled. You see the problem? This is a massive problem, and it's one that by and large is being ignored in the amillennial and in the postmillennial world. But the connection is clear. When Paul was talking in Colossians chapter 2, verse 16 and 17, and he said, let no man judge you in respect of new moons, feast days, and Sabbaths, which are present active tense, a shadow of the good things that are about to come. He did not say, and he knew how to say it, but he didn't. He knew how to say, which were a shadow of the good things that have come. But he didn't say that. He said they are, present active tense, a shadow of the good things about to come. He uses the Greek word melo with the infinitive. De Blas de Brunner, Greek grammar, says that meline with the infinitive indicates imminence. And so, for Paul, the feast days of Israel had not yet been fulfilled. Not all of them for certain, because Yom Kippur, and first of all, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and then Sukkot were the eschatological feasts representing and symbolizing judgment, parousia, harvest, resurrection, in other words, new creation. But I hope you see the point here, folks. The point of it is that all futurist eschatologies are in effect positing the fulfillment of Sukkot at that end of time, or that end of the Christian age, or whatever age they're postulating. But let me reiterate, wherever you put the harvest, that is when the law of Moses would be finally fulfilled, because that's when the last 3 feast days would be fulfilled. So when would the harvest be? Well, number one, as we've already seen, it would be at the end of the age. But when would that be? It would be at the day of the Lord. Matthew chapter 13, the Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather together all of those things that offend and cast them into the fire. So the harvest is not only at the end of the age, the harvest is at the coming of the Lord. And so, traditionally, it has been, and by the way, still is in the majority view, the miraculous gifts will continue until the end of the Christian age. Now, let me ask you this question. Since Sukkot, i.e. harvest, was the last of Israel's feast days and represented the turning of the seasons of her festal calendar, upon what basis do we rip and jerk Sukkot out of that old covenant context and make it apply to the end of the Christian age? And this is particularly relevant when we realize the Christian age has no end. Do you catch the power of that? The Christian age has no end. Sukkot, harvest, is at the end of the age. But since the Christian age has no end, then there is no future harvest at the end of the age. You see, harvest was to bring that age to its end. And that's something that is seemingly just simply overlooked, maybe even ignored, but it's certainly overlooked. So the point I'm driving at here, in the midst of all of this information that is critically important, okay, is that it has traditionally been believed that the harvest at the end of the age, when miracles would end, is at the coming of the Lord. Now, I want to tell you something. I have studied with, become friends with, a lot of Pentecostal ministers down through the years. In 99.9% of the studies that I have had with those individuals, they have been friendly, they have been cordial, they have been respectful. One or two weren't real happy, because as they told me, they could see what the Bible was saying. They were not prepared to accept it because they would get fired. Okay. So, here is the issue. Since harvest would be at the end of the age, right? Since Sukkot foreshadowed that harvest, then I want to repeat for the third time, because this is so critical. If you put the day of the Lord into our future, then obviously miracles should be still operative. If you put the harvest into our future, then the law of Moses remains valid and binding and operative. You cannot have the harvest without the fulfillment of Sukkot. But this means you cannot have the end of the law of Moses without the harvest. And so, my amillennial friends and brethren, and again, I was raised in that amillennial world, you cannot say, well, it's very true that harvest is at the end, but that's the end of the Christian age. But it's also true that the law of Moses ended in the first century. And they're all over the map on this particular issue. So what they're doing is they're saying, well, it's possible for the miracles to end in the first century, but we're still looking for the harvest. Folks, you see the problem? Now, I'm saying all of this in order to set the stage for properly understanding one of the key passages, one of the key controversial passages in all discussions of the end of the miraculous gifts. I almost feel like I need to reiterate everything I've said here this morning, because folks, you absolutely must catch the power. If you're an amillennialist, if you're a postmillennialist, you cannot say, and I'm sorry if this is repetitious, we learn by repetition, okay? So if you're an amillennialist or a postmillennialist, or for that matter, if you're a dispensationalist, if you believe the law of Moses ended in the first century, and even Thomas Ice, with whom I've had 4 debates, says the law of Moses was fulfilled and came to an end in the first century. So once again, if you believe the law of Moses has ended, if you believe the law of Moses was fulfilled, then whether or not you've ever thought about it, and that's part of what Morning Musings is all about, to make us think about things that maybe we've never thought about. But whether or not you've ever thought about it, if you believe the law of Moses ended in the first century, as virtually all 3 of the futurist views affirm, then you must believe the resurrection, the harvest at the end of the age is fulfilled. If you do not believe the harvest at the end of the age has been fulfilled, then you must of necessity believe that the law of Moses is not fulfilled. And yet all 3 futurist views say it has been. Okay? All right. With this in mind, with this as the foundation, with this as the introductory information, tomorrow we're going to take our first look at 1 Corinthians chapter 13, where Paul said, where there be prophecies, they shall fail. Where there are tongues, they shall cease. And he said, now I know in part, now I prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. Has the perfect come? Well, if the perfect has come, the resurrection has occurred. If the perfect has come, the law of Moses is no longer in effect. If that which is perfect has not come, and I'm just going to drop this little tidbit right here, if that which is perfect is not come, Old Covenant Israel remains God's covenant people. Okay, we'll have more, and we'll have it on the flip side. I'll see you there.